The camp was quiet that evening. Only the sound of boots on gravel and the hum of machines filled the air. The human soldiers were tired, their faces heavy with dust and worry. Supplies were running low and the cooks had nothing new to prepare. Most men just chewed on dry rations, too tired to even complain. Then he appeared. A thin figure walked slowly toward the gate, his clothes torn, his skin pale under the twin suns. The guards raised their rifles, nervous. At first glance, he did not look dangerous, just a boy, small and strange, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. But the silence around him made the guards uneasy. He stood there quietly, hands by his side, waiting. "State your business," barked one of the humans. The boy opened his mouth. His voice was soft, almost shy. I don't speak much, sir. But I can cook?" The soldiers blinked in surprise. Of all the things he could have said, this was not what they expected. The commander of the outpost, Captain Harris, walked up, his face lined with suspicion. He studied the boy, searching for lies. The alien didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't even beg. He only repeated quietly, "I can cook." For a long moment, no one spoke. The air was heavy, as if the boy's words carried something hidden. Finally, Harris shrugged and muttered, "Works for me. Put him in the kitchen." The camp laughed nervously. Some thought it was a joke. Others thought the captain had lost his mind. But the boy was given a place by the fire. He did not ask for weapons. He did not ask for safety. He only asked for pots, water, and a small bundle of herbs he carried in his pouch. That night, instead of chewing dry rations, the soldiers smelled something strange and warm rising from the kitchen. It was richer than anything they had tasted in weeks. The scent drifted across the camp like a spell, pulling tired men closer. Some of the soldiers mocked him. "What's he gonna do?" "Poison us," they whispered. Others were curious, their stomachs already growling. The boy did not answer their jokes, did not even look up. His hands moved quickly, smoothly, as if every chop, every stir was part of a dance he had practiced for years. When the first bowls were served, the laughter stopped. The food was simple, broth, bread, a bit of meat, but the taste was alive. The moment it touched their tongues, the soldiers sat straighter, their eyes wide. Warmth spread through their bodies, melting away exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, they felt human again. No one said a word at first. They just ate. Some ate too fast, afraid the magic taste might vanish. Others held each spoon carefully, savoring it like treasure. One soldier finally whispered, What did you put in this?" The boy lowered his eyes. "Just food," he said softly. Nothing more, but Harris was not a fool. He watched the boy carefully. The way his hands shook slightly when asked questions. The way his glowing eyes avoided direct stares. This boy carried secrets, dangerous ones. Harris did not know yet what kind, but he felt it in his bones. Later that night, when most soldiers were asleep with full bellies for the first time in months, Harris walked to the kitchen. The boy was still awake, cleaning the pots quietly, his movements slow and tired. Harris stood there for a moment, then asked, "Why here? Why us?" The boy froze. For a heartbeat, it seemed like he would answer. His lips parted, his throat trembled, but then he simply shook his head. "I don't speak much, sir." Harris frowned, turning to leave. But before he did, he noticed something strange. The fire under the pot was dying, yet the last bit of broth inside still shimmered faintly as if lit from within. The captain walked away with a heavy thought. This was no ordinary cook. The next morning, whispers spread across the camp. The soldiers woke with unusual strength, their aches lighter, their moods sharper. Some joked that the alien had cast a spell. Others swore they dreamed of home, warm meals, and laughter they hadn't remembered in years. The boy said nothing. He cooked again quietly, without pride or arrogance. But when the men tasted it, their hearts tightened. The food was not just filling their stomachs, it was filling something deeper, something they had lost in the war. That evening, one soldier muttered, "Strangest thing. The boy barely talks, but somehow, it feels like he understands us better than anyone else." The camp fell into silence. They all felt it, but were too afraid to say it out loud. Who was this silent stranger? Why had he come here offering nothing but food? And what price would they have to pay for his gift? As the stars rose over the camp, Harris sat in his tent staring at the glowing broth he had saved in a small bowl. He didn't eat it. He just watched it shimmer faintly under the lantern's light, wondering if he had invited something far greater and far more dangerous than he could imagine. The boy, meanwhile, sat alone by the fire staring at his hands. His voice echoed in his mind, the only words he dared to speak. "I don't speak much, sir, but I can cook." But deep inside, he knew the truth. Cooking was not just survival for him. It was the only way he could hide, and sooner or later someone would find out. The next morning, the camp was buzzing in a way it hadn't for months. Soldiers woke earlier than usual, some stretching with smiles, others humming quietly to themselves. It was strange. After so many weeks of gray days and empty stomachs, the men actually felt alive again. They all remembered the strange dinner from the silent boy the night before. At the center of this change stood the alien cook. He was already at the fire pit, moving quietly, arranging pots and bowls with a calm rhythm. His hands worked smoothly as if they didn't belong to someone so young. His face, though still pale, carried a strange calmness. He didn't speak, not unless asked, and even then his answers were barely more than whispers. A few soldiers gathered around, curious. "Think he slipped something into the food?" one muttered. "Poison that makes us feel good?" another joked nervously. But deep down they knew it was different. Poison didn't heal aching bones. Poison didn't make nightmares fade. The commander, Harris, stepped into the circle. He crossed his arms and stared at the boy. "Cook again," he ordered, his tone sharp. "This time I'll watch." The boy gave a small nod. Without a word, he poured water into the pot. He reached into his pouch of herbs, crushing leaves between his fingers. The smell rose almost instantly, sharp yet soothing. He moved like a craftsman, not a child. Each step was deliberate. Harris's eyes narrowed. "You trained for this?" The boy didn't answer. His silence itself became part of the mystery. The only sound was the bubbling pot and the soft hiss of fire. Soldiers leaned closer, their stomachs growling even though they had eaten just last night. When the broth was ready, the boy handed out bowls again. At first, no one wanted to taste it. They looked at one another, waiting for someone else to take the risk. Finally, one soldier, a man named Clark, lifted his spoon. He blew gently, then took a sip. His eyes widened. "It's the same," Clark whispered, his voice shaking. "It's the same as last night. Maybe even better." The others rushed to taste it one after another. Soon, silence fell again, but not the silence of suspicion. This was the silence of awe. The soldiers sat straighter, the weariness from long marches fading. Even old scars seemed to ache less. One soldier clenched his fists, testing his strength. "Captain, I swear I could fight 3 battles today," he said with sudden energy. Harris frowned. He tasted the broth himself. The warmth spread through his chest, steady and deep. It was not normal food. He knew it, but how? He set his bowl down slowly, his gaze fixed on the boy. "You're no ordinary cook," Harris said quietly. The boy froze, his spoon hovering midair. For the first time, his glowing eyes lifted to meet the captain's. There was something behind them, pain, fear, but also power. Then, as quickly as he looked up, the boy dropped his gaze again. "Just food," he whispered. That answer only deepened the mystery. As the day went on, the soldiers found themselves laughing more, their steps lighter. They cleaned their weapons with focus, trained harder, argued less. The change was undeniable. The boy never smiled, but he kept cooking as if it was the only thing he knew how to do. By evening, word had spread through the camp. Men who had once mocked him now lined up early, waiting for another bowl. Some offered thanks, others only stared in quiet respect. Even the skeptics who thought it was all coincidence had to admit, something in that food was working miracles, but not everyone trusted it. Late at night, 2 soldiers whispered near the fire. "You see the way the pot glows? That's not normal. He's hiding something." "Maybe he's one of them," the other muttered, glancing toward the horizon where the enemy lived. "Maybe this is a trick." Unseen, the boy sat nearby, listening. His hands tightened around the spoon. He didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He just stared at the fire, his face unreadable. Inside his chest, his heart pounded. He knew the truth. The food was more than food. It carried fragments of his past, pieces of knowledge passed down from people long gone, recipes that healed, spices that whispered to the body, turning weakness into strength. Cooking was the only way he knew to keep that legacy alive. But if the humans discovered the full truth, would they still accept him? Or would they cast him out like the others had? The next morning, Harris found the boy sitting alone by the empty pots. "Tell me something," the captain said, his voice softer this time. "Why come here?" Of all places? The boy didn't answer at first. His glowing eyes shimmered faintly in the morning sun. Finally, in a voice no louder than a breath, he said, "Hungry men. Need food. I can cook," that was all. Harris sighed. The answer was too simple. Yet looking at the soldiers training with newfound strength, he couldn't argue. The boy had changed the camp in just 2 days. But deep down, Harris knew one thing. Sooner or later, someone else would notice. Someone outside the camp, and when that happened, the boy's secret would no longer stay hidden. The first meal had done more than feed the humans. It had begun something none of them could yet understand. And in the silence of the night, the boy whispered to himself words no one heard. "Please, let this last." The camp had changed. In just 3 days, the air felt lighter, the men stood taller, and the wounds of war, both outside and inside, began to fade. All because of one silent alien cook. But peace never lasts long on the edge of war. That night, as the moons rose, gunfire echoed from the far ridge. Red flares lit the sky. A scouting team, sent to recover supplies from an abandoned depot, had walked into a trap. Harris slammed his fist on the table. "Damn it, we have wounded out there!" Panic spread through the camp. The rescue squad was preparing, but no one had eaten. They were too weak to march fast, too tired to carry the injured back. The medics shouted over each other. The commander's radio buzzed with cries for help, and then the scent returned. From the edge of the kitchen, the same strange warmth rose into the air. The alien boy stood by the fire, his eyes focused, his hands moving quickly. But this time, something was different. He didn't move like a shy helper. He moved like a surgeon under pressure. Soldiers stopped to watch. He dropped crushed herbs into boiling broth, his fingers glowing faintly. A quiet hum came from his throat, a soft, low chant. It wasn't in any known language. One of the soldiers, a linguist named Rosa, narrowed her eyes. "That's not just cooking," she whispered. "He's weaving energy into it." Harris stepped forward. "What are you doing?" The boy didn't answer. He stirred the pot one final time, then poured the liquid into canteens. His hands shook, but his eyes never lost focus. He handed the canteens to the rescue squad. "Drink before you leave," he said softly. They hesitated. One soldier asked, "What's in it?" The boy didn't look up. Strength, that was all. The rescue squad drank. Almost instantly, they straightened. Their shoulders rose, eyes sharpened, hearts beat faster. Pain faded. Fatigue disappeared like mist in sunlight. No one asked more questions. They ran. Hours later, the squad returned, carrying wounded teammates on stretchers. All survived. Some had lost blood. Others had broken bones. But every rescuer had sprinted through the rough terrain like wind. It was impossible. That night, the soldiers gathered around the cook. No one mocked him now. They asked nothing, only stared at him with silent respect and curiosity. In the quiet, a soldier named Vega whispered, "He's not a cook. He's something else. Something rare." The boy kept his head low, but his heart pounded. They were getting too close. That evening, as most of the camp slept, Captain Harris sat outside his tent with Rosa, the linguist. "You said he's chanting?" he asked. Rosa nodded. "I recorded part of it. Ran it through the translator. It's old dialect. Very old. Pre-Union era. Not from any planet in the common network." Harris frowned. "Meaning?" She hesitated. "It's not just cooking. It's ritual. He's mixing memory, emotion, and maybe legacy into the food." Harris's jaw clenched. "So it's magic?" "No," she said. "Worse, it's knowledge lost to time." Suddenly, a loud clang echoed through the camp. Smoke rose from the kitchen area. Sparks burst into the sky. The fire pit had exploded. Harris rushed over. Flames danced across the side of the tent. The boy was on the ground, coughing, clothes burned. A pot lay shattered nearby, and strange symbols glowed briefly on the ground, then vanished. Medics came running, but the boy waved them off. He tried to stand, shaking, one hand holding his side. Harris grabbed him before he fell. "You could have died." Harris growled. The boy's voice was weak. "I was testing." "Testing what?" He didn't answer. His eyes fluttered shut. The medics rushed him to the infirmary. Later that night, while others slept, Harris stood in the boy's tent. He opened the cook's small bag, curious. Inside were folded papers covered in symbols, recipes that read like spells, and pressed herbs from planets humans had never even charted. One note was written in shaky script. Do not cook near open flames during a blood moon. The spirits awaken. Harris shut the bag quickly, a chill crawling up his spine. The next morning, the boy sat up, wrapped in blankets. His skin was pale, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. Harris sat beside him. That wasn't cooking. That was dangerous, the boy looked down. I didn't want to hurt anyone. You didn't, Harris said. But I need to know the truth. Who taught you this? The boy hesitated, his voice barely a whisper. My mother. She was the last of her kind. Until they came for us, Harris stared. Who came? The boy didn't answer, but Harris saw the fear in his eyes and something else. Not just pain. Not just memory, power. And suddenly he understood. This was not just a test of fire, it was the beginning of something bigger. The sun had barely risen when the alert sirens screamed through the camp. A drone had picked up movement beyond the western ridge. Not just scouts. A full enemy patrol, get into position, Harris shouted, already strapping on his armor. The camp erupted into motion, soldiers grabbing rifles, sprinting to sandbags, turrets humming to life. But in the middle of all that chaos, the cook was missing. Where is he? Harris snapped. No one had seen him since dawn. His tent was empty, his fire pit cold. Only a single bowl sat on a crate, still warm, filled with broth that shimmered faintly blue. Harris cursed under his breath. Not now, but there was no time. The enemy was here. They came in black armor, their faces covered, their weapons glowing with red plasma. The battle was brutal. Explosions lit up the sky. Dust choked the air. Men screamed. The ground shook with every step of the approaching mechs. Harris led from the front, but even he could tell. They were being pushed back. The enemy was stronger this time, smarter, more aggressive, as if they were looking for something. Or someone. Then it happened. One of the enemy soldiers broke through the east wall. But instead of firing, he ran past everyone, straight to the kitchen tent. Harris saw it and chased after him. He tackled the enemy to the ground, tearing off his helmet. To his shock, the enemy was a woman. Alien. Her eyes were dark, sharp, and focused, not on Harris, but on the bowl of broth left behind. She smiled. You're too late, she said, voice cold. He was here, wasn't he? Harris frowned. Who? The cook, she hissed. The silent one. That stopped Harris cold. How do you know about him? The enemy woman laughed bitterly. Because we've been hunting him for years. Before Harris could respond, a shot rang out. The enemy soldier collapsed, killed by one of her own, likely to stop her from saying too much. But she'd already said enough. After the battle, Harris stood in the ruined kitchen tent, staring at the untouched bowl. Questions stormed in his mind. Why was the enemy after a boy who just cooked food? And how did they even know he was here? He found the cook later, near the forest edge, kneeling beside a tree, silent. You disappeared during the attack, Harris said. The boy looked up slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes were tired. I had to be sure, he whispered, that they wouldn't find it. Find what? Harris asked. The boy didn't speak. Enough, Harris snapped. They knew you. They were after you, why? The cook closed his eyes. Because I carry something they lost, Harris stiffened. What does that mean? The boy reached into his cloak and pulled out a folded cloth. Inside was a piece of stone etched with symbols that shimmered softly. Harris felt heat radiate from it, not burning but alive. This, the boy said, is a piece of the old flame. A recipe, not just for food, but for healing, for life, for resistance. Resistance? Harris echoed. The boy nodded. Long ago, my people were caretakers of knowledge. We didn't fight with weapons. We fought with nourishment. We cured sickness, lifted minds, fed armies, until they feared us. Who feared you? The boy looked toward the sky. The ones who believe power comes only through control. So they burned our temples, took our books, hunted the ones who remembered. Harris's voice dropped. And now they hunt you, the boy whispered. I am the last one left. The silence between them grew heavy. Why come here? Harris asked finally. Why risk everything? The boy looked down at his hands. Because your people are broken, starving, tired, just like mine were. And I could not do nothing. Harris felt something in his chest shift. This wasn't just a refugee. This was a guardian of lost knowledge, who had chosen to serve soup instead of revenge. Later that night, Harris called a private meeting with his top officers. We are no longer just guarding supplies, he told them. We are protecting something ancient, something the enemy wants destroyed. One soldier asked, "Sir, do you trust him?" Harris paused, then said, "I trust what I've seen. Our men are stronger, faster, healing from injuries in days instead of weeks. That's no accident. And if he says they're hunting him, we better believe they're coming." From that moment, the silent cook was no longer just a background figure in the camp. Soldiers stood watch outside his tent. The fire pit was reinforced. Every recipe he made was cataloged and stored, but not everyone in the camp agreed. Whispers started. "He's bringing danger to us. He's the reason we were attacked. What if he's leading them here?" The boy heard all of it, but he said nothing. He only cooked, and every meal still carried the same warmth, the same silent message. "I will protect you, even if you stop trusting me." The wind that morning was sharp, cold. It carried the scent of war. Everyone in the camp felt it. Even the ground seemed to hold its breath. Scouts had returned with grim news. An enemy army was approaching, larger than ever before. Not raiders, not a patrol, a full assault. "They know he's here," Harris said quietly. "They're coming to finish what they started." The officers sat around the war table, faces tense. Weapons were ready, defenses reinforced. But deep down everyone knew. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and nearly out of time, and yet, in the middle of that storm, the cook prepared a feast. No one asked him to. No one dared stop him. The boy moved like a shadow in the kitchen, quiet and focused. He lit 5 small fires instead of 1. His sleeves were rolled up, arms dusted with strange powders. Bottles clinked. Knives danced. His glowing eyes burned brighter than ever. Some soldiers watched from a distance. "Why's he cooking now?" one asked. "We need bullets, not bread," another muttered, but they still came closer, drawn by the scent. It was unlike anything they had smelled before. Deep, rich, almost sacred. Like memory made real. Harris stood silently, watching the boy work. "What is this?" he finally asked. The boy looked up. "The feast before battle." Harris raised a brow. "A tradition?" The cook nodded. "From before the stars were mapped, before machines replaced hands, warriors would eat together, not just to gain strength, but to share memory, soul, fire." He stirred the pot, and blue light pulsed inside it like a heartbeat. "This will be my last gift," the boy said. Those words hit Harris harder than gunfire. "You think we'll lose?" The boy looked up, calm. "I think I must prepare you to win. Without me." Harris stepped closer, voice low. "You're not dying. I won't let you." But the boy simply gave a sad smile. "I was never meant to last this long." As the sun dipped below the hills, the soldiers were called to the long tables. Not one refused. Even those who feared the cook now sat quietly, hands folded, eyes uncertain. The boy placed bowls in front of each of them, one by one. No assistants, no robots, just him. It was slow, careful, sacred. Inside each bowl, glowing broth, dark bread, roasted roots, and a single silver leaf floating on top. "What is this?" a soldier asked softly. "A piece of every place I've been," the cook answered. "A memory of the ones I lost." No one spoke. They simply began to eat. The effect was immediate, not dramatic, not explosive, but deep, heavy. Soldiers sat still, eyes wide, then soft. Some gasped. Others closed their eyes. One man dropped his spoon, whispering, "I saw my daughter. She smiled at me." Another said, "I felt my father's arms, from when I was a child." A third wept, mouth trembling. "I was back home. The air smelled like rain." Even Harris, hardened by war, found his hand shaking. The broth tasted like peace, like the feeling he had long forgotten, of being safe, of being whole. The boy stood nearby, watching. His shoulders drooped, exhausted, but his eyes remained bright. "This is no magic," he whispered. "It's memory. Memory is the strongest weapon." He turned to Harris, placing a final bowl in front of him. "This one is for you." Harris hesitated, then ate, and for a moment, he was 12 again. In a small kitchen, his mother laughing, the smell of stew filling the air, warm, real, alive. He opened his eyes and they were wet. No words were needed. The next hour passed in stillness. Not the silence of fear, but of calm before a storm. The soldiers moved with purpose now. They loaded weapons, checked defenses, shared quiet nods. Their eyes had changed, not scared anymore. Ready. As the final stars blinked awake in the sky, the boy walked to the center of the camp. He lit a small fire, pure white. It burned upward like a torch, a signal. Harris stepped beside him. "What are you doing?" The cook looked toward the dark hills. "Calling them." "You're inviting the enemy?" "No," the boy said. "I'm telling them." "We're not afraid." Sure enough, lights began to blink across the ridge. Enemy scouts, drones, armor. They were close now. The soldiers gathered behind Harris. No speeches, no goodbyes, just steady hearts and full bellies. The boy looked over the humans one last time. His voice, though soft, carried weight. "You gave me a place when I had none. Tonight I return that gift. If I fall, eat from the last pot. It holds what I cannot carry." Harris grabbed his shoulder firmly. "You're not falling. You're fighting." The cook gave one slow nod. The enemy was coming. But now the humans weren't just a tired, broken group of soldiers. They were family, and they had feasted together before the fire. The first blast came before sunrise. A shockwave tore through the eastern wall, shaking tents, shattering crates, and throwing dust into the air. Men dove for cover. Sirens screamed. The enemy had arrived, not in silence, but with fire and thunder. Captain Harris was already out the door, barking orders. "Positions! Shields up!"
"Hold the line!"
The camp roared to life. Human soldiers, once worn and hopeless, now stood steady, their eyes clear, their hands ready. Whatever had been stirred in them the night before, it hadn't faded, it had sharpened. But while soldiers rushed to the walls, the cook walked to the center of the camp. He wasn't holding a gun. He wore no armor. Only his apron and a satchel filled with spices, powders, and something wrapped in black cloth. A young soldier saw him and shouted, "You need to hide!" But the boy didn't answer. He stepped into the heart of the storm and set down a pot, right there on the battlefield. The enemy stormed forward, dark armor flashing, weapons glowing red. Drones buzzed through the sky. Giant war mechs stomped over rocks, heading straight for the camp's core. Harris saw it too late. "They're ignoring our lines," he shouted. "They're heading for him." 3 elite enemy warriors broke through the barricades, leaping over crates and dodging bullets. Their target was clear, the cook. The boy looked up calmly, and then he moved. It was not slow. It was not panicked. It was beautiful. He reached into his satchel and threw a handful of powder into the air. It sparked gold, then green. A flash, blinding. The 3 enemies staggered mid-run, then, faster than anyone thought possible, the boy grabbed a cast-iron pan, black, with age, and spun it through the air like a weapon. Clang. The first attacker dropped. Crack. The second took a ladle to the jaw, its handle reinforced with a hidden rod of vibrating metal. He hit the ground like a sack of stones. The third lunged with a blade, but the cook dodged, poured boiling broth directly onto the attacker's exposed visor, and the screaming that followed was short. Silence fell for a moment. Then the camp erupted. The humans, seeing the cook fight, not like a warrior, but like a storm of fire and motion, rose with new fury. "He's holding the center," one soldier shouted. "If he doesn't run, we don't run," another yelled. And just like that, the tide turned. The kitchen became a fortress. Pots were boiling not with soup, but with oil, fire resin, and explosive herbs. The cooking tent turned into a trap, every spice jar now a weapon. Bottles hurled like grenades, smoke bombs laced with sleeping powder. Knives that had once chopped vegetables now flew with deadly aim. And in the middle of it all, the cook moved like a whisper, light on his feet, calm in his face, deadly in his hands. Captain Harris stared in disbelief. He grabbed his radio. "Protect the cook at all costs. That kitchen is our heart." Enemy drones tried to swarm from above, but were swallowed by a column of steam laced with mirror dust. They fell like flies. A war mech stomped toward the kitchen, but slipped on a trail of burning oil poured across the path. It crashed sideways, its arm exploding as it hit a salt barrel laced with fire root. Harris and his squad moved in, pushing forward with renewed strength. It wasn't just the food anymore, it was the will behind it. The cook wasn't a soldier. He was a symbol. Every human on that field had eaten from his hands. Now they fought to protect them, Suddenly, from the enemy's rear, a commander emerged, tall, armored in dark silver, face hidden behind a visor. He pointed at the cook and roared something in an alien language. The cook turned slowly. For the first time, he spoke loud, clear. "This is not your world," he said. "And this kitchen is not your table." He opened the black cloth. Inside was a blade, not large, not flashy, but old, carved with the same symbols that shimmered in his recipes. Passed down through generations. Once used to cut roots that healed planets, and now it would cut something else. He held it like he had been born with it in his hand. The enemy commander charged. So did the cook. The clash was brief. Steel met steel. But the cook didn't fight with strength. He fought with memory. His blade moved in rhythm with every recipe he had ever made. Each step was a dance, each strike a flavor. And when the final blow landed, it wasn't just the enemy who fell, it was fear. The cook stood panting, the enemy commander at his feet. All around him, silence. Then, cheers. From the soldiers. From Harris. From the wounded who watched from afar. The kitchen had held, and the boy, once quiet, once ignored, had saved them all. He dropped his blade, walked back to the fire, and began stirring a new pot, because the battle was done but the hunger wasn't. Smoke still lingered in the air. The fires were mostly out now. The ground was broken, blackened, but the camp stood, and so did the cook. He sat beside the dying fire pit, hands stained with ash and blood, not his own. Around him lay broken pots, shattered bottles, and the bent remains of the cast-iron pan he had used as both shield and weapon. The soldiers gathered in silence. No one spoke. No one dared. Even Captain Harris, a man hardened by decades of war, approached slowly, his rifle slung behind him, his helmet off. "You saved us," he said quietly. The cook didn't look up. He was stirring a fresh pot of broth. His hands moved automatically, slow, calm. But there was something different about him now. He didn't look like a boy anymore. He looked like someone who had carried centuries. "They'll come again," the cook said softly. Harris knelt beside him. "Let them." The boy glanced at the captain. "You don't understand. They weren't after me. They were after what I carry." He pulled out a folded cloth from his pouch and unwrapped it. Inside was a tiny glass vial. Inside the vial, a glowing golden drop floated in liquid like liquid sunlight. "This is the last of it," he said, "the root of flame. My ancestors preserved it through generations. It can restore life to dying lands, or burn entire empires to ash." Harris looked stunned. "And you've been cooking with it?" The boy nodded. "In small amounts, mixed with memory, balanced with kindness. That's the secret. Used with greed, it destroys. Used with love, it heals." Harris shook his head slowly. "So, you're not just a cook." The boy finally looked up. His eyes didn't glow now, they shimmered, tired but at peace. "No," he said. "I'm the last of a forgotten line. My family was known as keepers of flame. We didn't fight with armies. We fed them. We healed what war broke. But when people started fearing knowledge, they hunted us down." He paused, voice low. "I was 10 when they came. I ran, I survived. And for years, I've just been cooking. Not to fight, just to remember who I am." A long silence followed. The wind stirred the ashes. Finally, Harris stood up and crossed his arms. "Well," he said, "you've got 2 choices." The cook looked confused. "What do you mean?" Harris smiled faintly. "You can leave. Disappear again. Go hide in some other corner of the galaxy." The boy tilted his head. "And the second?" "You stay," Harris said. "Not as a secret. Not as a weapon. As our cook. Our friend. Our brother." The boy blinked. "Even after everything you've seen?" Harris shrugged. "You fight better than most soldiers I've trained. You heal better than any medic I've known. And you make the only food I've eaten in 5 years that doesn't taste like recycled rubber." He grinned. "Works for me." A laugh escaped the cook's lips, small, broken but real. The tension finally shattered. One by one, the soldiers approached him, not as soldiers to a commander, but as family to one of their own. They brought him new pots. They cleaned the fire pit. They sat and waited, hungry again, not just for food but for peace, warmth, and memory. That night the cook served a final pot of soup. Not glowing, not magical, just warm, simple. Home. The taste wasn't powerful like before, but it was rich in something else, belonging. And when the soldiers finished, many of them didn't speak. They just patted his shoulder, sat beside him, and kept him company for the first time in years. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't running. He was just there. One soldier whispered, "He barely speaks." Another replied, smiling, "Yeah, but he feeds like a king." As the stars lit up above, Harris stood up and raised his bowl. To the boy who didn't talk much, he said, voice loud, but when it mattered, spoke through fire, food, and courage. The camp cheered, and in that moment the cook, silent, shy, forgotten, finally felt something he thought he had lost forever. Place at the table, a family and a future. He smiled quietly to himself and whispered the words he had once used to enter this camp. "I don't speak much, sir, but I can cook." And now the galaxy knew. Sometimes the quietest voices hold the loudest fire.